Afternoon, everyone. My name is Callie Hoyt. I work for National Marine Manufacturers Association on the federal advocacy team there, where my prime portfolio is really focused on recreation access and infrastructure. National Marine Manufacturers Association is a national trade group that has about 1,400 members across the country, really encompassing the full ecosystem of the boating industry. Now, before we get into the nitty gritty on infrastructure, I think it's important just to zoom out and take a closer look at the economic and social benefits of making those investments. And, everyone heard from my boss, Frank Hugelmeyer, earlier this morning, just really about how boating and the broader outdoor sector is just such a major economic engine in our nation. The outdoor recreation satellite account, the most recent report estimated that the outdoor sector contributes 2.1% of US GDP, $788 billion, and supports 5.2 million jobs. As Frank said, the outdoor recreation economy outpaced the growth of the total US economy before the pandemic hit. And it's really been one of the few sectors that's holding up the economy and surging post-COVID as we're looking to emerge from this crisis. Boating and fishing have been a top contributor since Forza started reporting. We're a $170 billion industry that supports nearly 700,000 jobs and 35,000 marine businesses. Now, as everyone has been hearing, outdoor recreation, our sector was so fortunate in the past year, and total participation as a whole across all of outdoor recreation grew to 52.9% in 2020. That's up from just over 50% in 2019. We had more participants than ever before in some segments within the industry, which is really exciting for us. There were 8.1 million more Americans that went hiking last year compared to the year before. That represents an increase of 16.3%. Bicycles, I know, I personally experienced this. Anyone that went to buy a bike or get their bike service at a shop, the biking industry saw an increase of 84% year over year. Freshwater fishing added 3.4 million participants in 2020 with an 8.6% gain. And shipments of RVs reached an all-time high in March of 2020 and in the entire first quarter of this year so far. The boating industry grew 12% last year, selling more than 310,000 new boats in the US, which are levels that we haven't seen since before the Great Recession. Now, for the first time in more than a decade, we've seen this increase in first-time boat buyers who really help spur this growth of versatile, more smaller boats that are, towed to local waterways and provide a variety of boating experiences from fishing to water sports. And a really encouraging aspect of this growth is that many of these new boaters and buyers are younger and more diverse, all really encouraging signs that we're building towards a stronger pool of next generation boaters. Now, I think the fact that our industry was able to, take this crisis and turn it into opportunity where Americans are recreating more, prioritizing getting outside more with their friends and family, it really presented clear challenges that lie ahead for us, particularly on the ability of our existing infrastructure to both transport our products and get them to market, but also to ensure that we're able to support the demand for access. The massive spike in demand for boating really exasperated a lot of our pre-existing infrastructure challenges, truly in the fact that we don't have enough access points, and the existing access points that we do have are aging and not equipped to stand the test of climate change now that we're seeing from rapidly changing water levels. Where we're in a situation where there's either too much water and the access is flooded, or there's not enough water, which we're seeing to become very prevalent throughout the West during this really serious drought conditions that's making a lot of access points unusable. I think 2020 was truly the year of close to home recreation. And as we heard from Deputy Assistant Secretary Estones earlier, that, parks and refuges and forests and waters just really became an amenity to countless Americans during this crisis. And, this last year really laid bare the underlying access challenges, and that more than 100 million people are not within, 10 minutes of a park or green space. And so, moving forward, where do we go from here? That's where infrastructure really comes to play. for all of the benefits of outdoor recreation, our industry is no longer a nice to have. It's a need to have. And when it comes to our nation's economy and our health and wellness, which became so clear last year, we really, now is the time to be making key investments to make sure that we're able to sustain and grow that demand. At the end of the day, we talk about this all the time. Infrastructure is the backbone of our economy. And, the boating economy, the outdoor economy depends on that access that infrastructure facilitates. We've heard a lot over the last day and a half about how instrumental and historic the Great American Outdoors Act is, and how critical that implementation will be towards mitigating the deferred maintenance backlog on our public lands and waters, and also how recreation projects can really drive economic development and help us to ensure that we are providing more equity, diversity, inclusion in our public spaces that are, driving forward that project selection process and for prioritization. So now we're really looking at how can we build upon that success of the Great American Outdoors Act and looking towards other regular congressional work that has to get done, such as the Surface Transportation Reauthorization, the Water Resources Development Act that's typically run on a 2-year cycle, and looking how we can begin making more of a fundamental shift towards how recreation is prioritized in those key pieces of legislation. When it comes to national infrastructure strategy, we want to see recreation have a stronger role there. And if we don't, the significant health, societal, and economic contributions that our industry is providing are all at stake. Since our industry had the Bureau of Economic Analysis or several reporting numbers, that's really been an instrumental tool that we've taken to really kind of working in earnest on an education campaign here in Washington, really kind of spreading the word, getting a stronger understanding of the fact that recreation is a staple in the U.S. economy, and it has to be a staple in our nation's infrastructure strategy as well. So, we're boots on the ground, making that case that investments in recreation infrastructure is not just about people getting outside and having a good time. It's about getting Americans back to work and really utilizing this thriving sector to revive local economies across the country and help ensure equitable access to the outdoors for all Americans. And again, the way that we're going to get there is through investments in green, blue, and even gray infrastructure that supports access to these recreation opportunities. For a really long time, there's been a piecemeal approach towards including recreation in these major infrastructure bills. Primarily in that, recreation has been an ancillary part of what the other major objectives are around mobility, transportation, commercial activity, and innovation. And so, we're trying to make that change and balancing that with the fact that our industry is, really starving for workers right now, at the same time that the nation is, facing a historic economic crisis. So while we have manufacturers that are on hiring sprees, trying to staff up to meet demand, they're not worried about not having, demand and customers to sell boats to. They're worried about the implications of boaters not having access to the waterways and that inability to meet and sustain this historic demand that we're seeing, and how much of that is going to have a more of a long-term impact on the viability of our sector. So I'm sure many people, anyone that has been reading the news over the last couple of months, every week is Infrastructure Week. And, I think ultimately right now, one of the biggest kind of pressure points around an infrastructure package is around the scope of it. And, that's definitely remained to be a main point of contention. But I can say from the course of my work in the last couple of months, I can say that there is broad consensus from both sides of the aisle that conceptually, recreation should be a fixture of, or that recreation is a fixture of the U.S. economy and really needs to be at the table when it comes to tackling the nation's infrastructure and economic opportunities. So, how do we address this? What exactly does that look like? As I said, we're, really focusing in on right now on the surface bill reauthorization. Once later this fall, we'll get started working on the Water Resources Development Act. But again, looking at these bills and policies that are traditionally structured and shaped around facilitating mobility, accessibility, transportation, and commercial activity, and looking at those bills pragmatically, and seeing what existing programs are there right now that support recreation, and what funding structures exist, and how can we reshape those to take a more intentional approach towards supporting recreation. Some of those priorities that we have, that we're focusing on right now at the package that's on the table, is the recreational trails program, which there's another session jointly that's happening right now, that they're talking about there. The Sports Fish Restoration Boating and Trust Fund, a really critical conservation boating access grant program that is traditionally a part of the surface bill. The Federal Land Transportation Program, another key funding mechanism for a number of federal agencies to help them to make critical investments in the transportation assets that are providing that access to high visitation recreation sites. And then also looking at, resiliency. What can we be doing right now to help make sure that our green and blue infrastructure is more resilient to the impacts of climate change? How can we be better preparing the private sector and the small businesses that really make up the core of the recreation economy, and help them to start making some really critical investments to protect their businesses and the recreation access that they are providing. Another new exciting area, I know that we just heard from Rivian about some innovations in the electrification space. That's another area that we're looking at, and obviously the existing programs and subsidies that have existed so far at the federal level have been geared towards the auto sector. There are a lot of proposals out there right now that would expand some of those programs, and we're really excited about opportunities, both on the manufacturing side, to help our manufacturers in the recreation space to be making more investments in green projects that are going to improve their energy efficiency and just kind of across the board reduce their carbon and environmental footprint, and also looking at incentives and resources that we can make available to our industry to help propel us forward in developing these next gen or renewable powered products. And then also at the same time, making sure that we're simultaneously looking towards building out the infrastructure charging network that is going to be necessary to advance any deployment of these types of products. I can say, just when it comes to boating in the electrification space, we're certainly not looking towards teeing up our industry to kind of be on linear paths with the auto sector, and that, we don't see zero emissions as the end game goal, but because ultimately, there is no real simple replacement for the energy density of liquid fuels in the majority of recreational boats. And our industry has made some very significant strides forward in reducing our environmental footprint in the last couple of decades. However, we truly believe that by investing in greener manufacturing processes and bringing these renewable marine propulsion and all recreation powered products to scale, really represents an opportunity to build upon the industry's success, and both, again, reducing our carbon footprint and emissions as well. But I think overall, I'll pass it over to Jeff here in a minute. I think the Great American Outdoors Act just really demonstrated that recreation is truly truly unique in that it has this increasingly rare ability to garner bipartisan support, really due to the societal, health, and economic benefits of it that became so apparent in this last year, that I think across the board our nation as a whole is much more appreciative of the recreation opportunities that we have available to us. And I think that the Great American Outdoors Act could not have come at a better time, and we are really looking towards building upon that momentum, so that was not a one and done, but that we're building upon that success to ensure that the Army Corps, the Park Service, the Forest Service, National Marine Sanctuaries, all agencies that are supporting and facilitating recreation have the resources and funding that they need to be able to meet and sustain that growing demand for opportunities to get outdoors, and also being able to better be engaging with the private sector and the industry to be collaborating and innovating to meet the needs of today and tomorrow's recreationists. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Jeff Krause. He is the Chief Natural Resources Manager, the Chief of Natural Resources Management at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Jeff?
Sure, thank you, Callie. Yeah, a lot within the industry certainly going on, and the Corps of Engineers has been one of the largest providers of outdoor recreation. We're sure excited to work with everybody to see where we can improve things, and we certainly have our share of challenges. I think that's what I'm going to try to focus on a little bit, is the challenges that we have within the Corps of Engineers, and how we as a unique land management agency under DOD sometimes runs into some other challenges, but hopefully with some help from partners like yourself and others on the call, we can become successful. So as the Corps of Engineers, we have a lot of resources out there. We receive about 30% of the visitation of our federal land management agencies, but only on 2% of the federal lands. And we kind of boast we're kind of your backyard recreation, because about 90% of our projects are located within 50 miles of a metropolitan area. We have a lot of infrastructure out there, over 3,700 boat ramps, 90-some thousand campgrounds. I can go on with a lot of statistics, but I kind of want to send on a message up front, is that when we talk about infrastructure, which we've been hearing a lot in the news lately, a lot about human infrastructure, cybersecurity. I think everybody on the call probably recognizes that the Corps of Engineers is a huge infrastructure agency, especially water-based infrastructure. And I think what I appreciate what Callie and National Marine Manufacturers Association is doing, along with other partners, is helping people communicate that there's infrastructure behind that outdoor recreation. You really can't enjoy the outdoors without that boat launch, without that marina, without the different facilities, the comfort stations that we provide. And however, the challenge we have there is that these facilities, especially in the Corps of Engineers, were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we haven't been able to do much with them. And as a agency who has a lot of infrastructure, like I said, we have over 25,000 miles of harbors and channels, navigation channels. That's enough to go around the globe. We have to compete with that within the Corps of Engineers in order to kind of fight for our own funding and for our own recognition. And but we do have our own infrastructure within recreation that provides such good services to the public. We're working to better recognize what we have there, what our challenges are. But that competition is pretty fierce. And unlike some of the other agencies that are under different committees or examiners and things like that, you mentioned the Great American Outdoors Act, and of course the Corps of Engineers isn't in the first round of that anyway. We hope to be maybe in future rounds. That presents struggles and challenges, because we have to basically compete within our existing funding. So we're trying to kind of change the discussion with the Corps of Engineers and our recreation program, that we not only provide a great service to the public for outdoor recreation, but we're also providing to protect those lands that we bought for those larger missions. Most of our projects have been bought for flood control, navigation. However, they provide great attractions for folks, and we have congressionally mandated direction to keep those open for the public. So we're trying to think not only what we do for the public, but how do we serve for the larger infrastructure missions as well. And I like to think the recreation program as a resilience program in itself. We protect the natural features, whether it's a project at a lock or dam. I believe that every campsite, boat launch is providing a hardened, managed area that we place people to minimize the impacts to the resources, but also protect those authorized purposes for the bigger missions. So we manage people so that we prevent erosion. We manage people to protect themselves and provide security to our infrastructure itself. And so really, when we think about infrastructure and the larger program with the Corps of Engineers, and we have these huge programs, I like to think that that boat launch is just as much as a component of that flood risk management or that navigation project. And if that's not being kept up, if it's not being managed, we really can't manage the people, and therefore the impacts is not only to the public that we serve to provide great outdoor recreation, it's also going to impact our ability to fully provide that mission, whether it's a navigation project or a flood risk management. So from our kind of Corps of Engineers and looking at the big engineering facilities that we have, recreation is even more important than just for public recreation and the economic benefits we get. We also have to make sure that we're protecting those missions. And in addition to resiliency, which I think we pretty much cover by putting people in the right places and managing those people with facilities that meet standards, sustainability is another focus. We certainly don't want to send people out and have impacts or degrade the environment that we want them to enjoy so much. And so as we go through and we're evaluating this infrastructure, we're thinking of green infrastructure, which is more land-based facilities, and then the blue infrastructure and our access to the water. We have a lot of opportunities for resiliency and sustainability. And on the resiliency, protecting erosion, a lot of our projects are susceptible to erosion. The increase in storm events at these projects, where a lot of people come to play, have increasing floods, as you mentioned, and cause more impacts to our facilities that are there, which require more replacement, more repair. So we're looking at retaining walls, trying to incorporate more natural-based solutions in some of those. On sustainability front that I mentioned, we have a lot of opportunities to increase or to improve our infrastructure that will sustain energy and water. A lot of folks don't realize how much these recreation facilities depend on sewage and sanitation. We have over $50 million in needs in just repairing our sewage and water treatment facilities, and trying to connect those to municipalities so that we have reduced cost on the taxpayer, but also long-term be able to provide those services. And same with our electric systems. You mentioned there's a considerable cost in order to provide those recreation services. The campgrounds have the big RVs. We need to do upgrades in those areas and make sure we have good infrastructure there. Some last kind of energy and water it kind of needs is, all those conversations that we have. We can do sustainability projects by increasing prefab type modular designs and really try to go green in this infrastructure. The issues that we have with the Corps of Engineers is just being able to get the resources and fundings for those. And so we're looking to work with partners to be able to have opportunities, whether it's legislative opportunities, whether it's partnerships that we do a lot of work on, to be able to continue to be one of those leading providers. We really are at a point with our infrastructure that it's at an age that we're really seeing those declines and not being able to provide the existing services. We'd love to provide more opportunities, but we do struggle with just being able to sustain and maintain our existing facilities and bring them up to the sizes that are needed for today's recreation users. And so we're excited to work with you and the other partners to get there. I think now, if you have anything to add, Callie, or if you want to open up to any questions.
Yeah, no, I think we're running a little bit low on time, and I'm not sure if Jill dropped off or not. Jill, are you there?
Still here.
Oh, okay. I didn't see your window. I just want to double check. Do you want to go ahead and start off the Q&A?
Yeah, so let's shift into Q&A. Just because of the schedule, we've got probably about 10 minutes. So like I said, if people have questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. But Jeff, I'm going to hit you with a question. You had kind of mentioned, a lot of the existing recreation infrastructure and facilities had been built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So, what is some of the conditions of the existing infrastructure, recreation infrastructure that Army Corps has, and what is the outlook for improving the facilities in poor condition, and how do you prioritize them?
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, unfortunately they're not in the state we'd like them to be. We generally consider them good to fair. We try to maintain safe facilities, but we have seen that decline occurring rapidly. The last year's the increase in visitation we saw was very hard on some on our infrastructure, but just the ability to keep up with our services and be able to operate due to overcrowding, congestions, and things like that, trash and vandalism really increased, and so to prioritize those annually, we take in our request. We try to evaluate them based on not only what condition they're in, which we go through a more formal process. I won't get into that now. But we also look at which sites are being utilized more and how much they're being utilized, and which is important to kind of keep that performance aspect of it, that we put our money, where the folks are visiting. And so we have a lot more that goes into our ranking on those, but we try to get our best bang for the buck. The most users, we try to get target our money there.
Thanks, Jeff. And Callie, I'll kick it to you. How are NMMA or other members of ORR or the outdoor recreation space, how are they helping Army Corps and other agencies to address these infrastructure challenges and kind of maybe help prioritize some of the places that are being used?
Yeah, so I think particularly with the Army Corps, as Jeff said, I think just, very often than not, they are just not considered as, or not recognized for the prominent, role that they have as one of the top facilitators of recreation. And so really what we've been doing is, as a part of our, as I touched on our education campaign, talking about the economic benefits of recreation, what we've really been doing is, going to the committees of jurisdiction over the infrastructure package, and really conveying, kind of putting those direct ties and correlations of the significant outdoor recreation economy and what role the Army Corps has in supporting that. And I think that has, really been instrumental so far, both in terms of kind of bringing to light, again, some existing programs like the Federal Land Transportation Program that the Army Corps is eligible for funding. But it's kind of a hit or miss of, because they are part of the competitive part of the program, they don't have a lot of certainty in terms of what type of resources they get out of that program on an annual basis. And so, going back to the Great American Outdoors Act and the fact that, the Army Corps was not included there, they don't have FLORIA authority. They really don't have many avenues to be able to retain or reinvest recreation fees that are put into the use of recreation assets. So really looking at any opportunity that we can, particularly right now, looking at what's on the table with the infrastructure package and seeing what changes we can make to better equip them to be able to be to have the resources that they need to match the demand that they have so that they can sustain that and then grow that into the future.
Thanks, Callie. And I know Nancy kind of echoed some of those comments in the chat there. Switching gears a little bit, Jeff, how can infrastructure improvements expand access to recreation opportunities and help build the next generation of recreation technologies at Army Corps projects?
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of opportunity. We saw that last year as the numbers of people coming in, and I think it's just the technology aspect of it. We're really trying to improve access, but not only the access aspect, but funding. And when people pay to come in, we've been looking at cashless systems to better focus people into certain areas and be able to manage people that way, but also make it easier for them to come enjoy our area, pay for it on site. I think that's a big area that we can help also maybe generate some revenues in some areas that we typically wouldn't in the past. We're trying to use technologies to inform people of where we may have overcrowding and divert them into different areas. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We're also using a lot of the technologies to assess the condition of our facilities and be able to better manage them because we'll have more information on them. So some different avenues there to reach out to other partners and even other agencies that have funding and utilizing some of those new programs and new technologies to help us.
Thanks. We've got just a couple minutes left, so maybe I'll kick it to Callie for one more question, and then you guys can give any final comments. And if anyone else has anything to add to the chat, Grace from NOAA mentioned that the sanctuaries could use a little bit of support too. A big fan of Grace and the work that you're doing. Okay, so Callie, what successes has NMMA and other ORR member organizations had in helping achieve recreation infrastructure improvements on federal lands and waters, and how can that be replicated?
So I think probably the best example to point to in terms of, what we've been able to kind of coalesce behind them and throw our weight behind is really getting the Great American Outdoors Act over the finish line. But our work there is not done. Now we go to the business of implementation there, and making sure that we're working with the agencies to ensure that how the projects are prioritized, and making sure that we're really utilizing those recreation infrastructure dollars towards getting the most bang for our buck, and keeping those high visitation assets in good working order. Jeff touched on this briefly. I think moving forward, as a part of that process of having a successful implementation of Great American Outdoors Act, we're in a couple of years, we're going to be at the point where we're going to need to be reauthorizing that, and looking at ways that we could incorporate other federal land management and water management agencies that were not included in Great American Outdoors Act. And again, just kind of looking how we can continue that success and that successful framework. And as we go, making sure that we are, not having a situation of winners and losers within the federal family, whether it's the Army Corps, National Marine Sanctuaries, but just making sure that across the board, every agency that, has a hand in facilitating recreation, that we're doing our job to make sure that they have have adequate, good infrastructure to provide that access, and then also working on the management side. We just heard from Chris and John to make sure that they also have those resources and tools to be able to be facilitating that recreation management side as well.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I think the Big Ten approach and making sure all of our partners and friends are included is really important as we try to help everyone get outdoors. We're running up against it. It's 2:15 and the next session is about to begin. Any quick closing comments, Callie or Jeff?
Jeff, do you want to
go
first?
Sure, I'll just close with folks just remind them that we have a great and substantial recreation program within the Corps of Engineers, and take some time to get out and look at some of our websites. We have a Corps Foundation that helps us out, and we're a little bit more challenged than the other land management agencies, so we're looking for that help and that recognition, and get the word out, because we have a lot to offer, and I think we have a lot more to offer with the help of our partners.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think that we have had some big wins so far, and I think that we just have nothing but opportunity ahead of us. And I think, the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, if anything, has just proven how powerful of a force the recreation industry can be when we come together behind good, common sense, impactful policy. That at the end of the day is, not just going to help us address our needs right now that are right in our faces, but also making sure that we are setting ourselves on course to make sure that we are in a better place, 10, 20 years from now. I would just encourage everyone that's on here. I think, again, just, on a day-to-day basis, as much as we can be doing to be educating members of Congress, elected officials, regulatory partners as well, just really on that economic impact of our industry, our segment, because I think that has really been kind of a key piece in the successes that we've had so far, and we're certainly going to have to continue that drumbeat as we move forward.